Good morning. Oh, I just got a note from Ryan, uh, saying he'd hoped to be here, but there's a childcare problem. How are you guys? Mm, ready to quit for the year? Ready to stop having meetings? I'm gonna wait a little bit. I looked at the list of who's available and nobody marked out today, so uh, uh, we'll see about that. Am are you guys not talking? Because I'm not hearing anything. Maybe everybody's on mute. I just don't like to be the only one talking. Sucks. I know Rydul's out. He
Yeah,
might try.
sorry, Tami. I think we were all on mute.
You're on. Eh. Well, we can start. Last week I made a space for good news, but nobody had any good news because all the people were flitting about. Kartik, do you want to tell the group what's going on with you?
Oh, with me. Oh, so you're
Oh,
talking about
you.
Narasimha's good news too. Oh, it's my.
This is true, but he's not.
Uh, yeah, he's not here. So yeah, with me, yeah, I think I officially accepted an offer to start a position at UBC Vancouver next fall. So yeah, so that's the big news.
So you
Congrats.
signed it.
Thank you. Sorry?
You signed it.
I did sign it just yesterday. So.
Wow. Wow. Well, you're in it now. Yeah, good job. Okay, yeah, so no, and Narasimha is at Yale where they give you tenure at the full professor stage instead of the associate, which I don't know if I'd ever take a job like that, but he did. And so he has finally received tenure. Um, so I met him at AGU well, not just to celebrate, but a celebration occurred. Um, okay, I want to get started. And I sent out a note about meetings going forward. And so I'm not going to ask for approval because a lot of people are just kind of doing their own thing anyway. But um, of the people who are here, is 9 a.m. Friday blocked out in your schedule next semester? I mean, is that a good time, or would you be teaching at that time? So I'm not, yeah, okay. Not requiring that people attend, but I just want to make sure we have a chance to attend because it is so hard to schedule. Um, okay. Well, uh, I'm really curious what people think of what we're presenting today, and Zara is going to take the lead on that, and I have some things to share within her presentation, but Zara's gonna lead us off. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning. I'm very sorry for being late. Didn't plan on it.
You're here now. So Zara, you should be able to share your screen. Are you gonna,
Yes, I am trying to share it.
are you getting an error message?
Which message?
No, are you getting an error message? Because I'm not seeing your screen yet.
Mm, it's sharing. You can see my screen?
Getting there. Now I can see me on your screen.
Just you, let me try another way. Chrome tab. Now you can see the PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm. Looking good.
Okay. This is the rough outline for my path forward in understanding the broader impacts of energy transition in household. As you might know, the electrification is a key strategy now in decarbonizing the residential sector with enhanced impact on energy saving, but it might have broader impact on household energy costs and even job creation. So, in this case, the focus will be on assessing the theoretical potential for transitioning Colorado state residential sector to 100% electrified usage. The key areas that we are currently analyzing is heating and cooling, as you can see in top right chart. Natural gas and electricity both accounts for the majority of energy usage in the heating segment for residential sector and also cooking segment. So the focus will be on heating for assessing the theoretical potential of energy transition. At this level, we assume no constraints, whether economic, behavioral, or infrastructure, because we want to establish a theoretical baseline for understanding what's possible for fully electrified usage in residential sector. Establishing on my previous work, as we called it, building object algorithm, we have a database on energy demands and energy consumption, also corresponding operating costs for Colorado and states, which is provided an output for ABM model to create 2.5 million agents or household for Colorado states. This have also provide a rough overview or understanding what would be energy saving for selected alternatives heating systems.
Zara, can I jump in here a little bit?
Yes, please.
So you're showing from Restock here, but the 2.5 million, first of all, 2.5 million is the number of households in Colorado. So
Yes.
that's why we're not randomly making 2.5 million agents. We have a statistical representation of
Yes.
the households in Colorado. And that, even though you've shown Restock here, it really draws on Kartik's work where he has identified the characteristics of each or buildings in each Puma, and then we use his Puma statistics to make those buildings, and then the heating energy is taken from Restock.
Yes. And as you can see, there is a like arrow to another snapshot that shows information on that part you explained right now.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted Kartik to see his place in this.
Yes.
So this means Kartik is a co-author on all our papers from now until the end of time, which will be really good for his trajectory, I hope.
Yes. This is actually that snapshot.
There we go. I probably just jumped ahead.
Maybe I should put this first and then the building
That's
object.
okay.
So as you explained, there is information from Kartik works and also the distribution that created based on the Kartik and output of building object, and which is an input to the Rydell's work to create those agents for understanding their choice of the alternatives and other possible decision-making impacts. Is there anything else that you want to explain here, Tami?
I don't think so. I feel like we're doing something very complicated to produce something very simple. So, um, so maybe we could let people ask questions to see if they understand what we're doing, or if there's anything confusing here.
Oh, because I shared the Google Chrome tab, I can't see anybody. Just jump in and ask questions.
Okay. I'll keep an eye on whether anybody's got their hand up, and I'll let you know.
Okay. So, for assessing the theoretical potential, we consider three key metrics that right now we are working on the number of houses that has the capacity to uh, be electrified in Colorado State, and possible impacts on the household in general or number of jobs created for later work. And also the energy usage that we are doing based on the energy consumption on uh, mm, existing HVAC systems and alternative HVAC system that we are selected. And finally, the CO2 reduction potential with full electrification for a later work.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
In addition to being key metrics, these are totally different, not totally, but different ways of looking at things. So if you do number of houses, you might get a different picture than if you look at energy usage, because some houses use obviously much more. And so are you presenting only number today, Zara?
Yes, only number of houses without considering the jobs and other information.
Right. So we're right. And that's the easiest one because it's just a count and but all of these are important, but we would want to look at all of them, not just the energy usage.
Yes. In next slide, this chart is based on the output from Rydul's work. As you can see, the percentages are closely follow the one that I provided earlier based on the restock only. And the natural gas and electricity accounts the majority of the mixture for energy usage in the household without considering the segments. I mean, this chart is based on the energy usage, not the type of usage, heating, cooling, or cooking. And if we consider post-electrification, 100% electrified scenario, we would only consider, for instance, gas transition to electricity. It's about 1.5 million houses that needs to experience this transition from gas to electricity. Or if we consider electricity transition to more efficient one, as you can see, about 500,000 houses need to experience this transition. So it's consider a significant number of households in one state only, Colorado. I believe, Tami, you want to jump for
Yeah,
remaining slides. Uh,
sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish and tell me when you're ready. Oh no, can you go back?
okay.
So then I'm gonna have to tell you when to switch. Is that right?
Uh,
Okay.
okay. Or we, as the PowerPoint is shared between me and you, you can share it from your desktop.
Yeah, let's just go with this if you don't mind, because then
Okay, please.
you don't have to wait for me to figure out how to share my screen. So th what you saw in Zara's slides is this notion of transitioning everybody. And I think a lot of people talk about the potential benefits of transitioning all the houses that you can. And I think then people people react to that, right? In several ways. One of them is immediately saying, well, what about this? What about that? People aren't going to do that. And so on. And so what we want to do is have a productive way to talk about those whatabouts, rather than presenting only what we call the theoretical potential, and theoretical means everybody does it. How do you present the limitations and their implications in a way that people can grasp onto and talk about productively? Okay, so now you can go to the next one, Zahra. So NREL actually had a framing for renewable energy installation, and I haven't seen them use this a lot, but I have that, but it is one that is rooted in some of the work that they've done. And so it's this notion of saying, well, the idea of transitioning everybody is just a potential. It's something we could achieve. And so the theoretical potential, and the reason that Zahra used that word before, is it's the maximum that you could imagine doing. So this figure was taken from NREL's work, and they provided ways to think about that potential in the context of installing renewable energy or solar energy. And so this is a different thing. It's like, how much solar energy could you get? And then they have a technical potential that involves how well the system performs. And so that this pyramid is a way of showing, yeah, you're not going to get all the theoretical potential, but how much are you going to get? And it is a way of quantifying specific barriers. And so I think what a lot of people present is especially electrification advocates, is they present the theoretical potential. People know it's unrealistic, and then they don't talk about what's unrealistic or what implications it would have. So I've felt like this idea that was implemented by NREL, and it's probably 10 or 15 years old, is a really visual way to talk about the idea that you have limitations. So I like it, and I used it in a cook stove paper, something totally different, in India, talking about the possibility of how many people can you reach. And so on the next slide, Zahra, I kind of drafted one, and this is for our comment, but showing some of the barriers that we've been talking about. So starting with the theoretical potential that Zahra showed, what is the physical capacity of houses? That might be the first layer to accept electrical technology. What is the awareness limitation? What limitations do preference place, including if you already have natural gas, then you might prefer to stay with natural gas, as could be inferred from Christine's work. And then at the very top, then we talk about affordability. So I think people jump straight from theoretical to affordability if they do anything at all, but being able to lay things out in this way might be a way to share barriers and to show how much you would get by removing those barriers. So this is a draft for people to talk about. What I would like to do for a lot of this time is to have people say what they think might be thrown into this, or what they think of this kind of framing. I recognize that the pyramid structure makes it so you're saying one is a subset of the other, and they're not always. And so that's a limitation of doing it this way. And then the next slide is kind of small and tweaky, but I wanted to I've been thinking about also how do you communicate the limitations of the time or the pace, right? Like not everybody's electric furnace breaks in the first year. So how would you do it? Would you um, just show what you could get in 1, 5, or 10 years on the bottom? So that's the thing I'm thinking about too. And what I really want to accomplish with this kind of framing is not um let's see, it is sort of kind of high level, and so you could argue, well, you what do the different sizes mean? And you can present the actual sizes elsewhere, but I feel like giving a visual thing that people can grab onto and remember, especially when they're not quantitative or super quantitative people, might be helpful in communicating the kinds of limitations that we've been working on. Okay, I think that is the last slide. Go ahead, go to the next one. I can't remember if I put anything else. Oh, yeah, you have a slide. Did you want to talk about this, Zahra?
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
This one is a rough outline of the process that I am currently implemented to assess that pre and post electrification for heating segments, like established based on data input from NREL and EIA fuel prices, and conduct assessment for existing fuel usage breakdown, and also post-electrification scenario for our selected alternatives as a transition to efficient electric HVAC, and finally the energy and cost calculation and comparison of the household that experience this transition based on their energy consumption, cost, and savings. And the future work will be on, as I previously mentioned, the other sector that might be beneficial for them to electrified, like cooking, hot water, and other appliances in the household, and also job creation impact. That was all. Thank you.
Cool.
Cool.
So
So
the
the
oh, how can I get rid of this echo? Sorry, you might need to mute. Yeah, okay, that did it. Thank you. The purpose of this presentation was first to show you how far along Zahra is. That one slide that she showed about numbers of transitions is the end point of that buildup of calculation. And then the other one is to introduce this idea of potentials and see what you might do with it or how you react to it. So now we can have time for discussion or thoughts, reactions.
Yeah, thanks, Zahra. I have a couple of thoughts or just comments. So one is, so now that you have a baseline as such with the full potential, then would you be thinking of different scenarios? Is that the next step? So and the richest people are going to adopt, so you have a number for that, or the most aware people are going to adopt, so there's one scenario. Is that how you'll start to think about different scenarios?
Uh, in scenarios that I mentioned, I didn't mean that, but actually, what we want to see is not the behavioral impact at this level. We want to see if we have number of houses in the Colorado state, how many of these houses need this 100% electrified experience or transition in heating segment as a first scenario, or and then we consider cooking and hot stove and other part of a building for these electrification scenarios. So at this stage or theoretical potential, we don't consider the choices.
But I think Kartik's question is, what do you do with that information? Or right? We're trying to represent the influence of, maybe we might say non-ideal situations, but realistic situations, whatever you want to call them. And so I guess my thought would be being able to quantify the subset of potential. Sometimes that would use a scenario approach for something like electric capacity. That's less a scenario, more an analysis, or more trying to get the information, um,
Mm-hmm.
or looking at permit data that Ryan can get, or other information that Ryan is pulling together for something like the attitudes part of the potential. Then you might run a scenario, speculating here, but it, it it could be something like, I think it's a combination of data synthesis, trying to bring in data to say how many people are constrained in certain ways or have certain attitudes. And you might either just do an analysis on number,
Mm-hmm.
or for me with a, sorry, I'm not saying this very clearly, um, and it depends on your definition of scenario. But I
Would mm-hmm.
I guess I could say something like, let's say that we are able to accomplish education or convincing people um, that the heat pump is their better option, or even something like Chris's work where we say people are motivated by thermal comfort. And so then you might run a scenario and see what additional number of people have
Mm-hmm.
switched, and that would tell you what the potential is.
I see. So are you thinking about this in terms of, if I interpret this correctly, there's like a building or a physical set of constraints, and then there is social or personal level of constraints. So for example, things like yeah, house efficiency, equipment, contractors, all of that have to deal with the house itself and nothing to do with the people inside. And then you
It-
have all of those, and then you have okay.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure of the order, but it seems like
Mm-hmm.
the physical sufficiency has to be is necessary but not sufficient.
Correct.
And so by demonstrating and that's why I put physical on the bottom, but it doesn't have to be there. It's just how I'm thinking of it now. I'm expecting that those layers are gonna change as we figure out how to craft that. And so, but I think what you really want to show with that pyramid structure is something like, well, if we removed this constraint, like if we made that be a part of the program, then that would all become theoretical potential again. But then you still have
Mm-hmm.
a behavioral or an acceptance aspect.
Right.
So
And
it's
how would you
showing,
say?
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Sorry, go on.
the different strata of limitations.
And how would you say that interacts with the two-stage decision model that everybody else is talking about? Is there an overlap or?
Mhm. So I really, the, I think the first stage to me is a temporal limitation. When do you get into the space? And that's why my second slide was struggling to say, how do you communicate the time dimension of this as well? Right? What do you get in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And so the yeah, so it's a, how do you communicate that two, it's almost like the two stages are two dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the number of people who enter it in 1 year is then going to have a little pyramid within it. Not all of them will go where they should go for environment. Some will go
Right.
in different directions for different reasons. Yeah, so I think the first stage is a time limitation. The second stage is a choice limitation, and then the pyramid is really showing the second stage, but it also has a temporal dimension, which is something that visually I'm struggling to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And there may
No,
be
that
better
makes
ways
sense.
to do
Yeah.
that. Like the first stage may be better communicated with the time series of how quickly things go.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. The very, very exciting work. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Kristen, are you sneezing again? No.
Yeah, I can't stop coughing or sneezing this morning, so
You just got over one.
it just doesn't stop. I know.
Any other thoughts? Chris, can I ask you, as somebody who typically functions more on the qualitative side, d does that does it speak to you at all to have a visual like that? Do you think it's helpful in communication? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I do find those visuals helpful, and they help me certainly more than, I as I've said before, I always have a much more difficult time on the quantitative side of things and modeling, and I often feel like I'm quite behind even after all this time. But no, the visuals do help make sense of that.
So I think most people are in a space where they feel lost by the quantitative side, even if they're quantitative in other areas of their life. When it gets to something outside their common experience, they find it hard. And so the visuals can be very simplistic, but just communicating the ideas. I guess one question is communicating magnitudes. Like, how would you do something? I'm still puzzling over this. How would you do something that was where to demonstrate how one effect was really dominant and then one was small? So I think the pyramid just that it's not really quantitative in that way, but sometimes you want people to understand this one's really a killer. And I haven't been able to use that framing to show that. Like you can make a tiny little tiny little top like a Christmas star.
I think what you're saying, Tammy, you get the questions that I have about the pyramid. It invokes a sense of sequential
I know, yeah.
nature that I think if I sat and thought about it longer and longer, I don't, in the way that Maslow's hierarchy is helpful for domains, but not helpful for interactions. I don't know that the pyramid, like to me, a market change could suddenly unlock a resource potential that was never unlocked. Like, the changing market for hydraulic fracturing meant that a resource that was previously untapped could be tapped, and the technological potential advanced rapidly. So like, I don't feel like the pyramid helps me think about
Transformation.
yeah, largely because it positions ideas in a linear way and with a magnitude, because the pyramid necessarily makes the top smaller than the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that, I don't know how, I think sometimes it's the limits of like only being able to see at the best in 3D. So I don't know that I'm suggesting it would be made better, but I think what comes to mind when I see the image is the limitations of time and the magnitude issue of, like, even if you're at the top, the relative impact of a market constraint might be all that matters. And so its magnitude is huge, even though it, like you just said, it could be like a tiny Christmas star at the top,
Mhm.
but maybe, have you seen examples where like NREL's put that, that, maybe the image is like a initial condition, and then they've used it to lay out a discussion that isn't as constrained as the visual initially is?
So I haven't seen it a lot, and I haven't seen them use it
Mm,
for, I just stole it because I liked
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And so it's not something that I've seen them use a lot. Maybe the reason that their figure is from 10 years ago is that it's not effective.
Mhm,
And I agree that one thing I don't like about it is the idea that things are nested in other things. Sometimes they're not, sometimes there's an overlap. But so I think it's most effective for when one thing really is required as a precedent. So
okay.
for example, there may be a spatial limitation to some things, like some things just don't work in this kind of environment. That
Mhm,
spatial limitation is not going to change, right? Until you overcome or, you provide infrastructure or something like that.
yeah.
And so that's some of what I want to communicate. I don't want to overdo it, but
Mhm,
I also haven't seen a better way to communicate limitations. What I see is like either people present the overall potential and then a whole bunch of people are like, yeah, and then there's all these things that are a problem,
mhm,
right? And so how do you present that in a constructive way? Like, yes, it is a problem, but if you could overcome this facet of it, then you would
yeah,
broaden your reach. So I
yeah.
see it as yeah, it's overly simplistic, but I also haven't seen other ways um of presenting limitations that are more effective.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that was a great answer because I just punted. So Ryan's question in the chat is or sorry, Kartik question in the chat. Hello, Ryan. Is a nice um example of that. Where does comfort fit? Like we showed that or Chris shows that it's driving a lot of decisions. Where would you put it? I think right now I struggle to have an idea on that. Ryan, FYI, pop the link in the chat to the presentation that we just ran through. And then, of course, you can watch the recording. Um, so I agree with you, Allison. And maybe a bigger question is how we tend to focus very much on quantitative numbers, and making little models run and presenting statistics. How do we communicate to people? Yes, there are limitations, but there is a possibility.
Mhm.
So I'm open to other things.
Yeah, I just respond, like, I don't expect any one image to capture all things. Sometimes the limitations of the visual model can be the points of departure for discussion of how the limitation reveals like what is unrepresented or harder, less tangible to represent. But
I think we need you to construct a structure, Allison, like representing all the limitations that people can walk around and squeeze and
Yeah, yeah. I like I've always liked the progression of looking at the models of the atom, that existed over time, because each one illustrates why it failed, but that is instructive. So
Mm,
Maybe what we need is a constellation of images like that, where it's like, here's the plum pudding model, and here's the the Bohr model, and then at each juncture you can see the improvement and the limitation.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just about ways to share the limitations. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, share the limitations of the theoretical potential. But then there's not a magic bullet that does it all.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan. I know that you
I escaped for a minute, so
you didn't benefit from our earlier presentation, but if you have anything to say, let me know, because
yeah.
this is a way I'm thinking of framing the Illinois work to begin with. Our Illinois work, maybe not yours.
What Ellison? I assumed Ellison, like the figure commenting was on the diamond figure at the end. Is that correct?
Yeah, the pyramid.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the image as I understand it, has a broad, it's like a pyramid, broad base, narrower towards the top. And I didn't catch when you joined, but I think what I was, one of the first things that jumps out to me is that pyramids imply a scale and a sequence that seems limited, because it seems like potential at the top of the pyramid, if realized, might unlock like a broader base somewhere below it, as one example. And yeah, and then I guess the other is like height. Things that are higher we tend to think of as better or more important, and I don't like that about pyramids. But I don't know. Yeah, I just don't like that about pyramids. Maybe I'll leave it at that. I don't. No.
This is just looking at like, and obviously I missed the presentation, so feel free to ignore any of this. But I think both in like the first the NREL figure and slides 9 and 10, one thing that stands out to me under like that top area is like thinking about markets as affordability. Like I do think one thing that showed up in our Denver data and in Chris's interviews is like limited contractors potentially matters. And like that's an aspect of markets that's different from affordability. It's like, what choice do I have of who to call? Like Chris mostly talked to people who all used one contractor. If that contractor doesn't install heat pumps, no one's going to install a heat pump. And I don't know, like to me, that's markets.
Yeah. But so I'm beginning to think that the names people use for these limitations are limited, and we could benefit from describing or from choosing words that more evoke the limitations we're talking about. And so I put information here, which but isn't maybe not information. Anyway, so I think that is a discussion to have among us. What is it that we want to represent? What do we want to communicate to people? Like, hey, you should, if you have no contractors talking about heat pumps, guess what? You're not going to install any heat pumps. And in a productive way, right? Like, so what you're talking about, Ryan, is the idea of lost potential or a lost opportunity. And again, this assumes that we want people to install heat pumps. I don't, maybe we probably do. But that's a normative thing that I want to be careful about. But I think there are ways of presenting the opportunity that's been lost by not having that a level of awareness or acceptance that could be motivating, Because I think right now the discussion is framed around, yeah, we could, like, it would be great on one hand. We could get all these possible benefits. And then on the other hand, there's all these complaints like, oh no, nobody believes in that. Or, I want to be somewhere in between where it's like, these are the constraints. If you work on these, here is the magnitude of benefit you could get. And so this is a simple try at doing that. It's not perfect, but being able to communicate visually that you're limited by things you're not paying attention to, instead of being a whiny like, "Oh, you're not thinking about all this stuff." It's presenting it as a possibility
Okay.
is something I'd like to do. And this may not do it, but that naming, labeling, coloring, those are things I'm interested in.
I'm curious what it would look like to structure this as a decision tree rather than a pyramid.
Hmm. Yeah, could be. But doesn't that also imply a sequential decision, which is, I think, one of the limitations of the pyramid? Could do.
But wouldn't theoretically we expect there to be some ordering?
Well, that's a question, right? Yeah, there's going to be an order. I think there's a temporal order in the way people make decisions. I don't know that's the only natural ordering.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger question is how do we want to communicate limitations, and what's the best visual way of doing that? So I think this is not there yet, but I don't think we've really started down this path either. So we're starting 1 foot. I think also, talking about being in the middle between theoretical and then just raising a bunch of concerns. I this is not the first time that I've seen it. Like, Allison and Naomi and I all have some experience in the cook stove world, and it's like exactly the same, right? There's a bunch of advocates who are like, you will save all these lives if you do this. And then there's a bunch of people on the other side going, oh no, you can't get over the cultural barriers, and so how do you create a productive conversation that people are willing to engage in? Okay, I don't have anything else. Thank you all for bringing your thoughtfulness to the team.
Thanks for sharing your work on this, and sorry, your progress.
I will watch the video because I would love to learn how this actually worked. So
Yeah.
please do post it. And then Tammy, let me know if you hear back on our missing abstract. So
Yeah, I forwarded it to Paul.
okay.
I mean, I don't know. I think he just goes and looks inside or something. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I'm assuming they were just like, this probably wasn't very good, and so we got rejected early in the process and he never saw it, but maybe
His,
not, who knows?
yeah, I can, oh, Paul, Paul is sending inquiries. No,
Okay.
I think, so I don't, he doesn't know what happened, but what I understand from him is that he was able to see all the abstracts that were submitted and he just didn't see this one.
Weird.
Right. So we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything from them. I looked back and like I have the September submission email, but nothing since then. So
Mhm. Yeah, it may have gone into its own special pile of ether.
that happens. So I had that happen with a journal article once for 2 years. So
What?
Whoa.
It's kind of sad that we think that might have been normal, right?
yeah, it was like 29. I submitted it in 2019 and the pandemic happened. And like, I just kind of forgot about it. And then like 2 years later, they're like, it's been accepted for publication. I was like, oh yeah.
Really? It took them that
Wow.
long to find reviewers though, right?
Well, it had reviewed and that was like the resubmission. So it was an R&R. We resubmitted like right before the pandemic, disappeared for 2 years, and then
Oh my
popped back
God.
out.
Delightful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
Oh, you as well. See ya.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.